Okay, so it's time to show you how we are going to be trellising our grapevines. That's up next. Hello everyone, this is Dwayne with Edge of Nowhere Farm, and we're coming to you here. It is May 2020. So for those of you who follow us on a regular basis, you guys know that we're in the middle of putting together a farm on 6 acres of desert land, and we've got a lot of infrastructure that we're putting into place this spring and summer so we can really get going on growth come this fall. So obviously one of those things that we're going to be doing would be winemaking. In order to do that, we need grapes. So what you see behind me here would be the beginnings of our vineyard. Now, I'm going to link a video here where we talked a little bit about this space and the things that we're going to be putting into here. Besides having grapes on trellising, we will also have garden beds that will be surrounded by that vineyard. So we're doing something very special in particular in this area. However, the trellising that we're installing is something that we're very familiar with, and I think it's something that may interest you even if you're not a regular follower. So what I also want to do, I'm going to go ahead and link our grape series for you here. So how we grow grapes here in the desert. We have a lot of experience with traditional trellising and cordons and things like that, and getting amazing production out of our grapes here in the desert. And the trellising that you're going to see us install here today is almost exactly the same. So we know that it functions and performs very well, and it's very easy actually to get installed. So that's actually what we're going to be covering here today. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start with the supplies that we need. Now, we've already gone through and we've installed the T-posts, but we do use an 8-foot T-post. The idea is we want to have a 6-foot bar, so that's our top bar on the trellising, and then a 3-foot wire. So that 6-foot mark is really where we're trying to hit, so we start with an 8-foot T-post. Now you'll see those surrounded by me here, and what I'll do in a moment is show you how we got them installed. Next up is going to be EMT piping. So we use an EMT pipe because it supports a tremendous amount of weight. So we use a 3/4 inch EMT. On the old property we used a 1/2 inch EMT. It was a little on the light side, so we wanted to give it a little extra strength when it comes to holding all of your grapes. So we are going to use a 3/4 inch EMT. So we have an 8-foot T-post, a 3/4 inch EMT, which is going to be at the top. And then of course we have to attach this EMT to the post itself to give it some stability. So what we found is we've actually found that it's very difficult to find and very expensive to get EMT fittings. And what we found is we found these fittings at Lowe's, and the brand is SteelTek, STEELTEK, and they've got a series of 3/4 inch fittings that are galvanized that I believe they use for making like furniture and things like that. The fit is not perfect, but it does work really well with 3/4 inch EMT. So what we have here is we have a T that we'll be using. We'll show you that. We have an elbow, and because of circumstances, we've got this designed in an L shape. We also have a corner piece. So we'll show you how all these get fit together here in just a moment, but this is how we're going to attach the EMT to our T-posts. And then of course you are going to need to have some wire. So we'll have a 3-foot wire. Again, we'll show you. This is 12.5 gauge high tensile wire. We use this for fencing and things like that around the farm. So we will be using this for our 3-foot wire. So that's about it for supplies. So you can see we're already surrounded by our 8-foot T-posts, and they're already in the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip back a couple weeks and show you how we got these installed. What we're doing today is we're going to get the T-posts for the vineyard into the ground. So talk a little bit real quick about what we're going to be using. Now we do have a gas powered driver. That's what you see right here. We've used it for other things in the past. Obviously, if you don't have a gas powered driver, you can use just a regular T-post driver, a handheld T-post driver. That's fine. I do have a mallet to start the T-posts, so we'll tap those in a few inches before we actually get the gas-powered driver in. We'll use a level to make sure the T-post is kind of straight. So the good thing about T-posts is you can bend them a little bit in order to make them a little more straight. But again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We do have mason line, so we're going to show you that here in just a moment, and a tape measure in case we need to measure. One other thing I want to point out, so we are using an 8-foot T-post, and the reason we're using 8-foot T-post is we want to make sure that the top of our T-post is at 6 feet above the ground level, and a 7-foot T-post, you're probably going to be a little too deep once you get it past the actual T. Also want to point out is when we're going to drive these in today is we have a marking here at 6 feet. So you can see we have basic masking tape. So we know that once we drive this post past the masking tape, we've got 6 feet of post left above ground. So you can see how deep that T is going to actually be. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get these temporary posts pulled on the corners and replace them with their permanent T's. We got these 2 corner posts in, so you can see we ditched our efforts on trying to get it level while we were pounding it in. That post driver really makes the bubble kind of a mess. So we came back and just basically bent the bars. You can kind of see me doing that. So we bent them with the level. So now we know these 2 are nice and straight. So now what we need to do is we need to put a mason line down between these 2 corner posts. That way we know where to actually place all of our posts here between them. We've got our mason line here in place. We already have the markings here for our posts, so we know the spacing between them. Now all we need to do is just butt those up against the mason line so we have a nice straight line going across this front. So we're gonna go and get to work. Pretty darn straight, so that mason line really made a big difference for us here. You know, we had this same setup on the old property, and I can tell you these T-posts were all wonky when we were done. So much straighter in look here. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and finish the rest of this, which is gonna take us a while, and we'll come back and show you what it looks like when we're done. We spent the last few hours getting all these T-posts in. That was 52 T-posts into the ground. Very thankful for that gas-powered driver because this would have not been finished today if we didn't have it. Either way, sorry for the sound because it's windy, but you can kind of get an idea of what this looks like. And essentially at this point, I think we are actually ready to go ahead and get started on the rest of the trellising. That's how we got all of these in. Now they're not perfect by any means, they are T-posts, but we are finding it's very easy to move T-posts and make adjustments, small adjustments at least. So for the most part, the T-posts that you see around me here, these are essentially level, about as level as the T-post gets. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and get some of our parts and pieces put together, so we'll show you that. First thing we need to do is get our T's and a small piece of EMT. So what we'll do is you're gonna see us cutting EMT pipe to about 8-inch lengths that we're gonna attach to the T-post. So Lori and I are gonna get to work, cut up all of our EMT piping with the exception of that span, which we'll get to here in just a moment. What you saw us do, you saw us cut some 3/4 inch EMT into 8-inch lengths, and we went ahead and attached them to the bottom part of the T. So you probably already get an idea of how this is going to look once we get it up on the T-post. This will actually be used to attach this bracket to the top of the T-post, which will eventually hold our EMT piping at that 6-foot level. Now you also saw us cut a couple pieces of EMT in half. We'll show you what we're going to use these for. These are actually going to be to reinforce the T-posts at the corners. That way we don't have that middle wire bending that T-post too much, but more on that here shortly. So So what we also have is we have some tie wire. We use galvanized tie wire. We cut these into about 8-inch strips, and we're going to use these to actually attach this bracket to the T-post. So Laura and I already have these set up, ready to go. We're going to go ahead and go through and get these attached to these middle T-posts first. And I wanted to show you a couple details. So we have the T up here. So now the outside, so us looking into our vineyard here, we'll be looking from this side. So we wanted the clean side out. Again, really more aesthetics than anything. So we have the brackets where we're making the attachments with these little Allen bolts are on the inside. So you can see already where that EMT pipe's gonna come through. Second thing, if Lori gets this angle on this side, one of the key things about this, when we inserted this 3/4 inch EMT, you'll notice we went all the way up. Hopefully you'll pick that up. We went all the way up to the top. That's on purpose because when we're placing these top EMT pipes, we want to make sure it hits this so that we're not pushing through and we get a good size as far as what we need to cut. And then of course the tie wire, we learned the hard way with the old property, always use galvanized tie wire if you're going to be working above ground. Either way, that's done. We have all the center posts with their T's on them. Now what we need to do is we need to go to the corner. Do we need to reinforce this post? Because when you go to pull your 3-foot wire, this T-post is going to bend. So we want to reinforce it. We're going to use some 3/4 inch EMT that we have cut to 5 feet to go ahead and reinforce this side. We'll have another piece of EMT that's basically up here with the elbow, and we do 2 separate pieces so we can adjust this up or down based on how the pipe looks as we go across. So we do cut it in 2 pieces on purpose. We're going to go ahead and get these reinforcements attached. We have one to put here, one in our corner, and one on the far side as well at the end of this run. Couple things on this. Obviously, the biggest thing I would say is that you want to make sure you leave this kind of loose. You can see this is spinning pretty easy. So that way we can actually make sure that we're level as we go across. Now, we're not going to measure that it's level. We're just going to visually look at it to make sure it's mainly level. We're not on level ground, so you are going to have some variation, or at least we will have some variation in how it looks. But we're going to try to make it as straight as we can. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to take each one of our EMT pipes. We have them laid out here ready to go. So we're going to go to each section and then we measure the individual spacing between the 2 posts. We always start at this end and we make sure we're not pushing against the post as we go and make our measurements. So again, just want to make sure that we're as exact as we can. And you don't want to pre-cut these because you don't know the exact distance. For us, we have our vineyard set up on 6-foot spacing. So this is about 6 feet. However, it's not perfect. And we want to make sure that the pipe between these 2 fits it perfectly. So we're going to go ahead and go through, do each one of these top pipes and come back to you when we're done. you could definitely tell it's not completely even or completely level. Now, that's okay. If you think about it, places like Napa Valley, where you've got large vineyards and you have rows upon rows upon rows of grapes, they go up and down hills. So guaranteed, they're looking at the exact same thing. The key for this is we want to make sure that we have a 6-foot height, give or take, for each one of the vines. So we don't want to necessarily level it. If the ground comes up and we try to level that top bar, we've got a smaller space to grow in. We don't want that. The idea is production out of our grapevines. Now, we still have one more thing to do. This top wire is where all of your fruit hangs from, hence the 3/4 inch EMT. Trust me when I tell you, I could probably hang off of these things and it wouldn't break that pipe. Plenty of holding capacity for your grapes. But what we do need is we do need that 3-foot wire, because that's where we're going to train our new grapevines up to establish cordons or to establish a head and lay canes down onto. So that's where we have our wire. Now the wire that we're going to be using is a high tensile wire. It's 12.5 gauge. You can find this 12.5 gauge wire that we're going to be using today at Tractor Supply, but the reality is anything between 10 and 12 gauge is just fine as far as this wire. If you want to use high tensile, go for it. It doesn't stretch as much, so it makes it easier on us, but it's a little more difficult to work with. Either way, it doesn't matter. What we need to do is measure 3 foot on either end, and then we need to pull this wire. So as far as pulling the wire, it doesn't need to be extremely tight, especially if you're using high tensile, because it doesn't stretch. So what you'll see is you'll see me actually pulling this. Now you can use a come along, or you can use a fence stretcher of some sort to help you with actually getting leverage and pulling this wire tight. However, you're going to connect it at each of the T-posts, and again, all this is for the cordon to essentially attach to, or your canes to attach to. So it's not going to hold the weight. What's actually going to hold the weight is going to be your EMT pipe. Either way, we're going to go ahead and get this 12.5 gauge wire attached at the 3-foot line and run it across this L that we have behind us. We have our 3-foot wire placed. Now, one thing I want to point out as we get to the end of this row, one thing we learned very clearly on the old property, setting something very similar to this up, is when we pull the wire on this end T-post, these T-posts, especially with the EMT pipe here and secured, the top of the post is not going to move. Neither is the bottom. This is about 1.5 feet in the ground, so the bottom of the T-post is not going to move. However, T-posts will absolutely bend. And pulling, even though it was just my strength pulling on it, trust me when I tell you, this T-post, you can see it's bent slightly, so there's still a little bit of give in here. But the reinforcement of this EMT pipe in here is really what's keeping this thing from really truly bending in. We really saw that on the old property, and very pleased to see that that reinforcement of the EMT pipe was enough. Now, of course, you can use a different material. Obviously, we have EMT pipes here, so we're utilizing that. But you can see that works really well to make sure you're not going to bend those ends in. And then of course the last thing, we're using high tensile here, so you can see when I pull that tight, all I need is a single wrap or two around here, and it keeps this nice and snug. And this is nice and tight as far as how the wire is sitting. Now, of course, we still need to attach this. So we have fence clips in the bucket. We're going to go back through, verify that we're at 3 foot on each one of the T-posts, and I think we'll be done for the day. you can see what that 3-foot wire looks like, nice and tight here, not an issue with your cordons. So a couple things that I should probably say in closing. The first one would be our ground. So T-posts work just fine. We use that 8-foot T-post, and going down about 1.5 feet in the ground with our hard soil here in the Arizona desert is plenty. We know from experience it works just fine. Now, if you have softer soil, chances are you're going to need to drive that T-post further into the ground in order to have a stable post as far as your grapes are concerned. So that would be one issue that you might want to look at once you're deciding on a setup like this. Second thing would be anything that you're going to add to the post in addition. And there is one thing we're going to add. We will be adding an irrigation line, so we'll add an irrigation wire right here at about 2 feet or so. And again, just run that straight across without any issues. So however you decide you want to irrigate, you're fine here. But in the end, I can tell you this. Doesn't matter what kind of grapes you're growing, whether you're using a 6-foot spacing or an 8-foot spacing, this is a very simple, you saw us put it together today, but a very simple grapevine trellising without having to use any cement, without having to dig any post holes, and without having to use any wood. So you're not going to have the decay of the trellising system itself. So hopefully that will work out for you as well. So just want to thank you for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Questions or comments, leave those in the comments section down below. Instagram and Facebook, we post content there you won't see here on the YouTube channel. And our Amazon shop, I'll leave a link down in the description. That's a free, painless way to help support the channel. If you start with that link, it doesn't matter what you buy, you help to support us here. So just want to thank you for joining us today and remind you, if we can farm on the edge of nowhere, so can you. That you're going to add an addition to the
That'll be a good blooper. Oh, it's this why my handle came off. Dang it.